Hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience. So we are just starting in a couple of minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Assomo?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Perfect.
us?
I hear you very well.
Yeah, okay, sir. Sir, all ready, sir? Anything you would want to? Yeah, we can start.
No, fine.
Okay. Thank you. So very good day to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. On behalf of the Wildlife Institute of India and its Category 2 Center for World Natural Heritage Management and Training for the Asia and Pacific region, under the auspices of UNESCO, it is my pleasure to welcome the guests and participants to this webinar titled Tourism and World Heritage, Maximizing Benefits, Boosting Nature. It is indeed our privilege to have Mr. Lazare Eloundou Assomo, Director of the World Heritage Center, Paris, headlining the keynote in this webinar. His presence is significant also because this webinar is in fact our own modest contribution to reach out to the wide diversity of audience in the context of the 50th year anniversary of the historic World Heritage Convention. Thank you, sir, for your presence. As regards the schedule of this webinar, we'll speak for about an hour or so. The introduction and welcome will be offered by Dr. Gautam Talukdar, the faculty in charge of the Category 2 Center at Wildlife Institute. Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, the Director of Wildlife Institute, will be presenting the closing remarks. For all the participants, you'll have time for questions and comments after the speech, and are also welcome to put them in the chat box. My name is Neeraj Kakoti, and I'm from the Wildlife Institute Category 2 Center, your moderator for this event. Very good day again. So before we commence proceedings, may I please allow me to make a few standard housekeeping announcements. All participants are requested to please keep the microphones muted and videos switched off. Any comments, questions may be kindly sent through the chat option, which will be taken up for consideration after all the talks have been delivered. And hope you will kindly bear with us for any technical issues in the delivery of this webinar. At first, I would like to call upon Dr. Gautam Talukdar, scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India and in charge of the Category 2 Center here in Dehradun, India, to please welcome our distinguished guests and greet the participants. Dr. Talukdar will give an overview of the activities of the Wildlife Institute at the Category 2 Center here. He has an experience of over 2 decades in the area of landscape ecology and modeling. He serves as an expert for both the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He is also a member in the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. Thank you, sir. May I please invite you?
Thank you, Neeraj. Welcome to all the participants for this event. It's indeed a great pleasure to have Mr. Assomo as our keynote speaker. And I look forward to having him speak in his keynote address. For people who are not aware, Mr. Assomo has recently taken over as Director, World Heritage Center. And in fact, this is our first interaction with him after he has taken over as our director. I will briefly tell you all about what we do at the Wildlife Institute of India Category 2 Center for the World Natural Heritage Management and Training for Asia and the Pacific region under the auspices of UNESCO. So what are its mandates as well as achievements and activities that we end up doing here. Of course, the reason for existence of this center is basically the World Heritage Center. We are here primarily to support the World Heritage Center implements, which is headquartered in Paris, to implement the World Heritage Convention of 1972. And having said that, I go over to the mandate and mission of the Category 2 Center. It's primarily to strengthen and implement the World Heritage Convention by building capacity of all professionals and bodies involved with the World Natural Heritage in Asia and Pacific through training, research, dissemination of information, and network building. In the Asia Pacific region, since you see that our mandate is restricted primarily to the Asia Pacific region, we have 44 state parties in the Asia Pacific, and we have about 196 cultural World Heritage sites and 70 natural World Heritage sites. Very few, that is just about a dozen mixed World Heritage sites, which include both natural and cultural. So a total of 278 World Heritage sites in total. There are many other Category 2 centers like us, and you can see their location mapped on, so total 11. And this World Heritage Center, the Wildlife Institute of India, C2C, is the only one in the world that exclusively specializes on natural and mixed heritage site issues. The key areas of our activities are primarily in the 5 regions. So it starts with, of course, technical support for nomination and inscription of natural World Heritage sites. And we give a lot of technical support to different governments. The other area is reporting and monitoring for natural World Heritage sites, which includes response to decisions for World Heritage Committee, follow up on these decisions, helping prepare the state of conservation reports to the countries, helping the countries also to address the periodic reporting, and as well as helping different sites for reactive monitoring missions as and when needed. We also do a lot of advisory services, specifically for Indian government relating to World Heritage matters, which includes responses to parliamentary questions, interventions, helping parties to intervene in the World Heritage Committee sessions, inputs to other Category 2 centers also, inputs to IUC and World Heritage Outlook, and as well as management effectiveness evaluations, primarily enhancing the World Heritage. A lot of emphasis goes on to our capacity building programs, and we regularly hold both national as well as international workshops and training programs. We also conduct a master's program and a certificate program for World Heritage Management. And lastly, we also focus a lot on outreach and awareness. So we, collaborate with different agencies and do various kinds of celebrations, including World Heritage Day celebrations, organize seminars, international coordinations, and publications. So with this, I thank you all for patiently listening to me. And the last slide here shows the campus of the Wildlife Institute of India Category 2, as well as the Category 2 Center. And all the participants are welcome to visit this particular organization whenever possible. With this, I once again welcome Mr. Assomo and hand over to Mr. Neeraj Kapoti.
Thank you, Dr. Gautam, for sharing about the Institute and the Category 2 Center and its array of activities We are now ready with our keynote speaker, Mr. Lazare Eloundou Assomo, Director of the World Heritage Center, Paris. Mr. Assomo is a graduate in architecture and in urban planning. He has a very long association with UNESCO, starting with the Africa unit of the World Heritage Center in 2003, which he went on to head from 2008 to 13. Subsequently, he has also been head of the UNESCO office in Bamako, as well as UNESCO's head representative in Mali. He, in fact, returned to the UNESCO headquarters, Paris, in 2016, initially as Deputy Director of the Heritage Division and of the World Heritage Center. In 2018, he became Director of Culture and Emergencies, and now, in fact, heads the World Heritage Center. A very rich association indeed. Among the significant achievements of Mr. Assomo, he has contributed to the creation of the African World Heritage Fund, which is in fact one of our partner C2Cs, and the development of the World Heritage Urban Architecture Program. He has coordinated several restoration projects in Mozambique, Uganda, and Mali, as well as capacity building initiatives in the region. He's also co-author of a book, African World Heritage, A Remarkable Diversity. So we have a guest who is very learned and experienced in this domain of heritage and world heritage in particular. So may I now call upon Mr. Assomo to please present his address. Sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Assomo, yes, we can hear you. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me first start by telling you how honored I am to be this morning. I mean, from Paris this morning. I know in India we are, I think, a couple of hours ahead, but also to let you know that apart from what you have said in introducing me, my long-term relation and history with India has been for many, many years. As you all know, the World Heritage Center was also headed by a citizen from India, Dr. Kishore Rao, whom some of you know definitely very well, and who is a respected man that we were proud to have as one of our director here. And of course, in my different careers, I've been cooperating with and collaborating with different professionals from India who are very well people respected. And some of them have recently even established UNESCO chairs in dealing with heritage matters and museums in India. So you can imagine that this is a great pleasure for me to be invited in this seminar on the extremely important topic of tourism and world heritage, which you rightly choose as an important subject to organize. So I'd like to thank you again for this initiative. And also I take this opportunity to congratulate the Category 2 Center for this extremely important and impressive work that you have been doing over the past years to ensure the conservation and preservation of natural world heritage in the region. So firstly, let me start by saying that what I want to first say is to highlight the impact of the World Heritage Convention in relation to natural heritage in particular, as well as to share and some of the threats facing it. But before moving on to discuss the World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program, which I will explain a little bit later, which is managed by UNESCO, I will try to explore the issues on the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we are all aware, and I think you will agree with me, has significantly impacted global tourism and certainly at many of our, I would say, beloved World Heritage sites. Now, the important and intrinsic relation between UNESCO and natural heritage. You know that UNESCO is working with the different mechanisms. And one of them is the World Heritage Convention, indeed. But you know that through all this mechanism, UNESCO contributes to the protection of over 10 million square kilometers of natural and cultural sites across the globe. Today, the World Heritage List has 1,154 sites located in 167 countries. There are also more than 700 biosphere reserves, exactly 727, that are located in 131 countries. And lastly, you know, approximately 169 UNESCO global geoparks in 44 countries across the globe. Today, there are 257 natural sites inscribed on the World Heritage List, including 218 natural sites and 39 mixed sites, both cultural and natural, representing over 95% and 20% of the list in terms of the surface and number of the sites, respectively. And this accounts for 8% of the world protected areas. So the contribution of the 1972 convention, as you will see, is a highly significant one. And the Asia Pacific has the highest number of natural sites on the World Heritage List, as you know. If I can give you some figures, which of course some of you know, but I think it's good to share them again. 110 countries have at least one area designated as a natural or mixed World Heritage sites in the world, and 82 are in the Asia and the Pacific. So the Asia and Pacific region encompasses a wide range, as you can see, of climate, landscape, and ecosystem, and hosts almost 1/3 of the natural and mixed World Heritage properties, as I said. There are currently 60 natural and mixed sites located in 21 Asian countries, including 3 transboundary sites and 2 natural and mixed sites in 7 Pacific countries, of which 3 in the Pacific Seas. Having said that, if we can talk a little bit about the threats to natural heritage. One of the major threats to natural World Heritage today is climate change. I think it's important to say it now at the beginning of my speech. Natural disaster, rising sea levels, loss of species, and many other consequences all pose a threat to the outstanding universal value to natural World Heritage sites. But yet, these natural sites are also an important tool to combat the effect of climate change, we have to say, if they are well managed and protected from threats such as the thematic of over-tourism. For example, World Heritage sites are important carbon stores. There is an estimated, and I can say very important, of the carbon stored in their above ground biomass. If entirely released into the atmosphere as CO2, this would represent, I think, almost 1.3 times the global total annual CO2 emissions from fossil fuels. What also you need to know is that World Heritage forests in particular also absorb significant amounts of carbon. And we have released a recent report on the importance of World Heritage forests recently, which of course you can access on our website. As I was saying, 24 out of 82 natural and mixed World Heritage sites in Asia and the Pacific are currently under reactive monitoring and reporting. When we speak about the reactive monitoring and reporting, it means that these are some of the sites where missions are needed to go and evaluate the state of conservation of the site. And this is being done simply because those sites face a complex range of threats, not least of which is climate change, as I have said, which underscores the contribution of natural World Heritage towards combating its adverse effect. However, there are also many other threats related more to direct human use and interaction with the protected areas, ranging from the impact of invasive species to changing land uses, illegal hunting, extractive industries, to urbanism and infrastructure development, among many others. And tourism, or over-tourism to be more precise, is another one of these potential threats, as much as well-managed tourism is a potential for income generation, enhanced protection, and prosperity. Now, if I can say a little bit about the World Heritage Sustainable Tourism Program, which we are leading. Recognizing the potential of tourism for World Heritage, as well as the reality that World Heritage status is an important pillar in the tourism strategies of many state parties to the convention. The World Heritage Committee established the UNESCO World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program 10 years ago exactly, in 2012. The program provides an international framework for the promotion and protection of World Heritage properties and their outstanding universal value, while at the same time, it ensures that tourism contributes to the sustainable development of local communities. So with an approach founded on one dialogue and also stakeholders cooperation, this program encourages World Heritage and tourism stakeholders to partner and share in the responsibility of achieving sustainable development and in conserving our common cultural and natural heritage. The program collaborates with a wide range of stakeholders, including the private sector, member states, the UN and development agencies, the UNESCO chairs in tourism, and also with the support of our range of UNESCO field offices that we're having, including the one we have in New Delhi. The role of this range of stakeholders is to help the program provide advice, recommendation, cooperation and advocacy in the development of sustainability at World Heritage properties through well-managed tourism activities, enterprises, and project development toward this end. The program does focus its efforts in three main areas. The first one is training and capacity building on visitors management. The second area is advocacy for appropriate policy. And the third area is awareness raising. Now, during the last 2 years, the world has been facing a sanitary crisis. So I'd like to speak a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on tourism and natural cultural heritage. Unfortunately, at present, we cannot speak about tourism if we do not address the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a major negative effect on the tourism sector and on communities dependent upon tourism connected to World Heritage properties, be they cultural or natural. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, tourism was a major economic sector globally. For the past 2 years, however, the situation has been very different. The advent on COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020 would lead to subsequent devastating impacts on all aspects of the global visitor economy. From a World Heritage Site perspective, in the 9 months that allowed the UNESCO, in particular the World Heritage Center, recorded that in 2020, 71% of the World Heritage properties were forced to close. There was a 52% reduction in entry fees, where fees are charged. And World Heritage properties experience an average of 157 days of closure. 78% of World Heritage properties reported that COVID had negatively impacted communities living in and around them. And finally, there was a 66% drop in visitors to World Heritage properties. So you can understand the consequences. And according to the UN World Tourism Organization, between the period of January and May 2020, 100% of the global destination had imposed travel restrictions, and 45% totally or partially shut their borders to tourists and closed their parks or protected areas. Other measures introduced included restrictions on transiting travelers, suspensions of flights, quarantine or self-isolation requirements, and the need for medical certificates. International tourist arrivals declined also by 74% globally during the year 2020, from 1.5 billion to 381 million. This led, as you can imagine, to a serious loss of $1.3 trillion in tourism exports, which means 11 times the income loss experienced during the 2009 worldwide economic crisis, and an estimated loss in global gross domestic product of over $2 trillion. So, you know, tourism is an essential contribution to World Heritage Sites revenues, financing conservation programs and local livelihoods. But however, the inability of people to travel to World Heritage properties has widespread implications for revenues. The viability of tourism business and the effect on destination livelihoods and visitors' economies. That is, jobs, salary cuts, redundancies, sales of goods and services in the tourism and value chain. Just to give you a concrete example, recently, a pilot project funded by the government of Japan entitled Post-COVID-19 World Heritage Site Management, Integration and Conservation, Tourism and Local Livelihood Strategies at World Heritage Sites. This pilot project began implementation with the innovative approach of combining conservation and livelihoods for local communities in the context of COVID-19. The project is aimed at developing new livelihoods models with locally sourced tourism and product offers in Africa, in the Arab states, in Asia Pacific, in Latin America, through the use of digital tools. And in Africa, it is in Cabo Verde, in the Arab state in Jordan, in the Asia Pacific in Vietnam, in Latin America in Honduras. Over the course of the pandemic, the media has also reported very different impact and responses among World Heritage properties across the world. For example, in Peru, in Machu Picchu, Machu Picchu closed for 8 months and then reopened with a new restriction of 675 tourists a day, which was approximately 30% of its previous pre-pandemic limit. Meanwhile, the Indonesian government is planning a multi-million-dollar tourism development as part of its overhaul of tourism in Komodo National Park. They also propose to introduce a $1,000 membership scheme for visitors to move away from mass tourism in a bid to protect the park's iconic Komodo dragons and their habitats. As lockdowns were lifted, domestic travelers flooded into natural World Heritage properties, leading to a resurgence in over-tourism and accompanying environmental and crowding impacts. For example, in Snowdonia National Parks in the United Kingdom, there was increased camping, wood collections, makeshift toilets, and litter. And emergency power were used to temporarily ban camping in August 2020. When, for example, China removed its quarantine requirements for a holiday weekend in April 2020, and free entry was offered during the 3-day Qingming Festival. Thousands of citizens flocked to the Mount Huangshan World Heritage Site. The site's 20,000 visitors limit was reached, and officials announced that the national park would be forced to close again. You can understand that the crisis has exposed the critical links between nature, culture, heritage, and tourism, and how their recovery is interdependent. And despite the challenges of the crisis, there is a growing consensus among tourism and heritage stakeholders that this global pause in travel can and must be a turning point for a more balanced, inclusive, and sustainable approach. So through its World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program, UNESCO is working with key partners in the public and private sectors to advocate for a sustainable approach to tourism management that ensures the long-term enjoyment of natural heritage resources, its direct and indirect benefit to local communities, as well as their important contribution to climate change. I have framed a few questions and key concerns around the issue of tourism recovery and management of World Heritage properties that I want just to quickly raise here before closing my speech. And these questions are, firstly, what role can and should tourism and travel play globally now? Another question could be, before the crisis, 1 in 11 people worldwide worked in travel and tourism. How do we steer now together its evolution into the world's largest sustainable sectors? If I, for example, take these questions, we can try to build some answers, and we do have some answers. And I hope we will continue exchanging together on some of these issues together. But what for me, I want to focus on are the key considerations around destination stewardship, transparency, and economic impact for goods. Because tourism can and must be a force for good. Another question could be, how should we think about capacity and domestic versus international tourism now? You know that before the crisis, ever-rising visitors numbers were overwhelming a number of destinations and attractions, leading to conflict between tourism and local communities. And you also know that the term over-tourism emerged as a defining characteristic of global mass tourism. So the pathway to recovery lies in rethinking tourism to address these imbalances, including an over-reliance on international tourism. One can ask ourselves also another question: how do we strike a sustainable balance between preservation, conservation, and economic factors? Because tourism is an important revenue earner for cultural and natural preservation, but when mismanaged, it also creates significant threats. And you know that to support World Heritage site and destination in managing tourism responsibility and inclusively, we here at UNESCO, we have developed a number of tools and projects. We have the online Sustainable Tourism Toolkit, which provides a guidance to World Heritage managers across 10 main areas of tourism management, including governance issue, infrastructures, value, behavior, and investment. And you can access this tool easily with no problem. To conclude, there are many areas where the World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program can expand its impact and reach such a developing more than sustainable development project with state parties, continued advocacy for policy development, further engagement with the private sectors and the tourism industry, as well as working with our partners and member states such as India, the categories 2 center, in the development of more capacity to plan and manage the issue of tourism in and around World Heritage Site. Several of the initiatives I mentioned above, and I didn't probably insist on all of them or mention them, and I can also cite here, but I didn't go through it, the World Heritage Journeys and the Sustainable Travel Pledge, and many others. They have great scope to grow and to engage more private sector operators and state parties in the sustainable management and use of World Heritage properties toward building a balanced prosperity for local communities and their natural and cultural heritage. We continue to work with both the private sector and member state on developing projects which will help to continue our work in the tourism and World Heritage areas, as well as to help us realize some of the most strategic aspirations I tried to mention in this intervention. So that's more or less what I was able to put together and to share with you. And I really want to thank you for your attention. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assomo, for this extremely insightful address that you just made. You covered not only the significance of World Heritage in general, but natural heritage in particular, all the factors that are affecting these sites, and where tourism is a double-edged sword, so to speak, which gets many benefits, but can also be a cause of concern. And you also laid out the principles of sustainable tourism and the policy and objectives that you mentioned about. And in particular, of course, what really hit the heart is about the impact of the pandemic on tourism and World Heritage in general all across the globe. Of course, it has been very devastating for a very large section of population in the world, no doubt about it. And I think it's a very interesting point that you made, that maybe this situation could be a watershed in terms of how we rethink, how we go ahead further in terms of conducting tourism activities in a more sustainable, balanced, and equitable manner. I think there'll be a lot of lessons that we can learn from here, and hopefully we can continue this interaction and engagement, as well as in terms of taking up the questions that you have raised on yourself, in terms of what are the issues that we need to be concerned about, what we need to rethink, countries in general, as well as the global community in particular. So thank you very much, Mr. Assomo, for this, again, as I said, insightful address. Going on to the next part of this particular webinar, before we close, before we come to our Director of Wildlife Institute of India's closing remarks, I would request we have maybe about 5 minutes of time for any questions and comments that have come through. May I request my colleague, Mr. Anuranjan, to please coordinate any of the questions that have come in and which you would want to put to Mr. Assomo.
Thank you, Mr. Kakoti, and thank you to Mr. Thank you, Mr. for this wonderful talk which you have given, Mr. Eloundou, for this wonderful talk you have given. And sir, I think the most insightful bit, like Mr. Kakoti mentioned, was the questions you left us with, because the world is not the same place anymore since the COVID pandemic. And I think the questions you left us with would give us a lot of food for thought. Amongst the many questions which have come in on the chat, sir, I would like to focus on just particularly one, because in the interest of time. Sir, you mentioned a lot of the questions. One of the questions which we would have is, since this is a center dedicated to natural heritage, Traditionally, in continents like Asia and Africa, where we are based, there has been no distinction between the natural and the cultural sectors. And a different Western school of thought slightly differed on that. Now that there is a more proactive approach and interaction between the cultural and the natural sectors, sir, if you could throw a little light on how that can impact sustainable tourism and how the collaboration between natural and cultural sectors can help lead to better results. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important question. I think to answer this question of the interaction, I think we have to go back, and I'm not going to talk here about the issue itself of the tools on how to manage the tourism, etc., and its values. I think the purpose of tourism in general, it's also to contribute to the sustainable management of the World Heritage Sites. So it's not only places to enjoy, but these are also places to learn. And this is where I want to come. Because the moment you integrate the fact that you are visiting a place, not only to enjoy the place, but also to learn about others, about local communities, you immediately have to put in place a visitor's experience that combine both natural and cultural values. I think that's the approach. And then the tools then comes and are put together in this perspective. So it's very important to have this in mind, because this is where now you will start bringing together issues like facilitating the close collaboration between the tourism sector, the culture sectors, for promoting this. Absolutely very important to put. And our toolkits that I've spoken about, they have these elements, and they can help you put this in a way together. We also have a visitor management assessment tool, which is also important to help in this. And the examples that I've given, which is an initiative that we are having on the World Heritage Journeys, provide also some example where this has been also highlighted quite clearly, although it's true it has focused more on the visitor experience, but the idea, of course, is that if you bring together both the natural issues and the culture sector, you actually encourage visitors to stay longer and to support local culture and to support the creative industries. So that's the way I see, and I hope I have tried to answer this question. Thank you very much.
Right, Mr. Eloundou, thank you so much. And yes, very pertinent point. When people come and visit, they experience the entire spectrum of both nature and culture, they're likely to stay longer and go back with the better memories of the place. Thank you so much, Mr. Eloundou. I would like to pass it back to Mr. Neeraj Kakoti to take up the next item.
Thank you, Anuranjan, and thank you, sir, for the question, and there's a response to the interlinkages that we spoke about. May I now invite Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, the Director, Wildlife Institute of India, and who is the head of the Category 2 Center. He is nominated, in fact, currently as an expert on natural heritage on India's delegation as part of its membership to the World Heritage Committee. He's also a national focal point for Indian natural and mixed sites for the periodic reporting for Asia and the Pacific region. Dr. Mohan is a senior officer of the Indian Forest Service with long management experience in planning and protected areas, as well as sound academic credentials in leading forestry and wildlife institutions of the country. Sir, may I please call upon to give your closing remarks? Sir, Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, sir, can you hear us? Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Now.
Can you hear me, Neeraj?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, will you put on my video or it's fine this way? I think I'm traveling, so it will be good to keep the audio.
Yes, sir. Just the audio should be fine now.
Fine. So, let me first of all express my gratitude to Mr. Lazare Assomo, Director, World Heritage at UNESCO Paris. I think Mr. Assomo brings in so much of rich experience with his career spanning nearly 3 decades in this sector. And we were all really privileged to hear him today, this afternoon. And he brought in so many important facts in front of us, so many important issues, which I think are critical when we talk about tourism and World Heritage. I think the way he gave examples from all over the world and also brought in the very, very important aspect of COVID and how it has affected tourism world over, and such a large sector, I mean, affecting economies, affecting livelihoods, that I think COVID has forced us to give a rethink on the whole thing. It's almost like rebooting everything. I'm just returning from Andaman Islands, one of the most scenic and one of the most biodiverse area when it comes to marine biodiversity in the world. And I was talking to the managers there, site managers of marine national parks, and they were all telling me that how it is affecting local economies and how nicely they had actually built up a sustainable way of approaching tourism in these very, very fragile ecosystems. And those islands, I think much of their economy actually depends on tourism. And I think this is where the World Heritage sites have to, in a way, become role models in this critical hour when we are trying to rethink about everything. And particularly our natural resources, I think never before the humanity has realized the importance of our natural resources in dealing with in pandemics like COVID, and their great value to give us the much required resilience in this matter. I would cite examples from India only in this concluding part of this very important webinar, where we will all actually immensely benefited by Mr. Assomo's ideas, and some of them have actually shown the way of sustainable tourism. In India, in fact, the word ecotourism is far more popular than sustainable tourism. And I think the concept is the same, the ideas are the same, and it has to be sustainable and it has to benefit the locals. And I think we have got great examples from national World Heritage sites like Eloundou, where a large part of the population of that region is getting directly benefited through sustainable tourism, not from the last few years, but for many, many decades. I think the way locals have been integrated into the management and benefits arising out of that protected area, that World Heritage site, I think that has shown the way to many other protected areas in the country. We may have only 8 sites, but they have to give direction to nearly 1,000 protected areas in the country. And I think the same holds true for the whole world. World Heritage Sites have to become role model for such initiatives wherein tourism can be taken forward in a very, very sustainable manner, and it can bring in a huge stake of locals in the management of these areas. And I think gradually the whole world has realized that to conserve these areas, until unless we have a very strong global support, we are not going to sustain them. We are not going to let them continue forever and benefit the humanity globally. So I would once again express my gratitude to Mr. Assomo for having spared his time today, and people who've been listening to this webinar, not only from India, but from other parts of the world also, and particularly the Asia Pacific region, where our Category 2 Center under the aegis of UNESCO is mandated to work on with the managers of this region. So I'm sure all of them have got benefited by your wonderful talk. And I think it has shown us the way to take the, to gel tourism with World Heritage and take things forward at a time when we are doing a rethink at everything. So once again, thank you very much. And thanks to all the participants who have taken their time off for this important webinar, and to my team at Category 2 Center, Gautam Talukdar, Neeraj, Anuranjan, and everybody there for having organized this very important webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for being able to join in and always providing your first-hand experiences of dealing with site managers and the sites per se right on the ground, from being a manager to a supervisor. Your insights have always been very to the point. And in fact, we acknowledge that you have been traveling from very remote location. You've been on the road and travel, and yet you managed to sort of join in this webinar and in fact greet the director of the World Heritage Center. So thank you so much, sir, for the effort and the support that you provide us. And so I come to the close of this webinar. I acknowledge, in fact, with gratitude, our keynote speaker, Mr. Eloundou Assomo, for sharing his very deep thoughts as well as his very precious time. This is our first interaction with him, and it has been absolutely very enlightening, and we hope to continue this further. I, of course, acknowledge the Asia Pacific unit in Paris for the World Heritage Center for their support and guidance to us always. Special thanks to Mr. Brendan Kassar, Program Specialist at UNESCO, who has helped to coordinate, in terms of organizing this particular webinar. Thank you, Mr. Kassar. And one cannot, of course, appreciate more the involvement of all the participants who has made this whole effort worthwhile. Thank you, everybody from different parts of India as well as the other parts of the globe. A big cheer for my colleagues at the Category 2 Center for all their support, back-end support in making this successful. And of course, support of our faculty in charge, Dr. Gautam, the Director, Wildlife Institute, Dr. Dhananjai Mohan, and the Dean of the Faculty of Wildlife Sciences, Wildlife Institute, Dr. Ruchi Budola, for providing us support to successfully conduct this webinar. And this is goodbye from me here, and hope to link up again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you for the invitation. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Thank you,
most
sir.
welcome. It was our
Thank you,
pleasure.
Mr. Eloundou.